Virtual Learning Object, Listening and Speaking Activities by Lida Solano, Group 37, Materials Design course. Boosting Skills, a Path to the Future of Education. Introduction. Welcome to my Virtual Learning Object. I will show you some strategy that you can use either if you are teachers or students for the development of your English language classes. Specifically, we will focus on 2 language skills, speaking and listening. Let's start. Here we have the objectives. Identify some tips provided to improve the communicative skills of speaking and listening using these functional materials for any use of the English language. In order to have both face-to-face and virtual tools to be integral teachers of this subject. Objective to conduct a bibliographic and research review in order to define the guidelines and characteristics of each skills and the difference in their applications among students. Objective 3, to offer a space for learning and sharing information among teachers to prove that one can develop learning objects to ease the use of new technologies for students. Listening materials, 5 tips to design this type of activities, face-to-face activities. Tips 1 and 2. Before listening, during listening, and after listening. Before listening, prepare your students to introducing the topic and finding out what they already know about it. A good way to do is to have a brainstorming session and some discussion questions related to the topic. During listening, be specific about what students need to listen for. They can listen for selective details or general context or for emotional tones. After listening, finish with an activity to extend the topic and help students remember new vocabulary. They could be a discussion group craft, project, writing task, game, etc. Type 3, 4, and 5, video. You can play a video clip with the sound off and ask students to make predictions about what dialogue is taking place. And then you can discuss if their predictions were right or wrong. Noise. Reduce distractions and noise during the listening segment. Equipment. If you are using a cassette player, make sure it produces acceptable sound quality. Repetition. Read or play the text a total from 2 to 3 times. Tell students in advance you will repeat it. This will reduce their anxiety about not catching it all at the first time. Content. Unless the text is merely a list of items, talk about the content as well as a specific language. The material should be very interesting and appropriate for your students. Recording your own tape. Write appropriate text or use something from your textbook and have another English speaker read it onto tape. Homework. Give students a listening task to do between classes. Encourage them to listen to public announcements in different places and try to write down what they heard. Online activities. Online. Use pre-recorded video instructions, messages or lessons from the teachers, asynchronous. Keep your intro short and sweet, then get down to business. Remember, it may be difficult for students to pay attention for a sustained period of time. You don't want to lose them before you have even begun the lesson. As you create videos, it is important to monitor your pace, provide clear and concise verbal instructions, explicitly prepare students to listen for key ideas and concepts. Tip 1, 2, and 3. If you are looking for structured listening activities, check out the Listen Wise website. They offer ways to teach, practice, and assess listening comprehension using podcasts. Tip 4. Students are required to use their listening and speaking skills to follow verbal instruction, respond to teacher classmates, explain their thinking, state ideas in a clear and concise manner, use content-specific vocabulary, and ask questions for clarification. Tip 5. Address listening skills wherever and however instruction is happening. Define listening roles. Before jumping into meetings and discussion, it's important to review listening roles, active listening strategies, and discussion guidelines that were established in your traditional classroom setting. If these were posted on a lecture chart, try to replicate that chart and post in your virtual classroom. Also, it's important to have active listening strategies outlined in this Edutopia article. Speaking activities. 5 tips to design this type of activities. Face-to-face activities. Tip 1 and 2. face-to-face. Speaking is fundamental to human communication. The timing of a speaking activity in a class can be crucial sometimes to encourage speaking English yourself as much as possible in class. 2. Dealing with common discussions. Think of all the different conversations you have in one day. Compare that how much writing communication you do. 3. Work in pairs or groups. Give them the tools and language they need to be able to the task. Return to the original or another interactive group activity. 4. Losing control of the classroom. An activity to calm them down and make focus before speaking. Change the pace of the class and type of activity. Tip 3, 4, and 5. 3% of students with language-based learning disabilities, such tasks can be quite challenging. It may be difficult for them to pay attention, auditorily process information, access background knowledge, engage working memory, recall and retrieval, and use executive function skills, all of which are not necessary skills for academic success. You can focus on the use of content-specific vocabulary during an oral presentation or the use of compound sentences when explaining the plot of a story. Investigation. Collect data and monitor progress. Just in ELA, teachers use portfolios to monitor progress of students. Writing teachers can also create portfolios for analysis of the specific spoken language skills or content knowledge. Knowledge. Using audio or video recording, students could simply record themselves on their phone or laptop to send to the teacher, or they can use an app such as Flipgrid or Seesaw. Online activities. Type 1 and 2. Procedure. Choose a vocabulary topic. This can be vocabulary you have recently studied or a topic you want to introduce. Tell students to write a list of 10 words. Steps. Pre-teach or revise structures for definitions. With expressions like you find it this on, it is an animal, it's the opposite of, it's a thing that you can use for. Path. Tell students to look at their list and give them a few minutes to think of how they can define these words. Love. Now, students work in pairs or groups of 3 and define their words to each other. Their partners have to guess. Tip 3, 4, and 5. Option 1. First of all, separate the 2 points of noisy classroom and out of a controlled classroom full of students talking and interactive in English. Option 2, learner-centered classroom where learners do the talking in groups and learners have to take responsibility for using communicative resources. Option 3, teachers all over the world continue to face the same hurdles, but any teacher who has overcome these difficulties and now has a large class of energetic students talking and working it. Option 4, many students equate being able to speak a language as knowing the language and therefore view learning the language as learning how to speak the language. Option 5, one way to tackle this problem is to find the root of the problem and start from there. If the problem is cultural, that is in your culture, it is unusual for students to talk out loud in class, or if the students feel really shy about talking in front of other students. Conclusions. Aptitude. My learning proposal is a completely free and generalized proposal based on my own personal experience as an English language teacher. More than anything, it is based on the question how to generate in the student appropriation for the learning of their second language. Motivation. This has always generated problems of different kinds for the students. The students' grades generate fear, panic. They do not feel valuable if they do not get a good grade, or they feel excited if they get an excellent grade. We are teaching them to grade themselves with a number or ready to settle for it. Effect. Mainly to achieve these skills, you must have a lot of perseverance, discipline, and desire to learn the language. In this way, it will not be difficult to do it. The playful activities and application of this second language are very necessary to find that learning is not simply for pleasure. Tools. Anyone at any age can learn a second language after a first language is already established, but it takes a lot of practice. Second language acquisition often happens when a child who speaks a language other than English goes to school for the first time. This brief looks at the best way to teach a second language and how speech professionals can help. Second language acquisition. And here you can have the references. Thank you very much for your attention.